Good afternoon. I'm going to get my presentation up there shortly. Great to be here today. I was just thinking today I'm either very old or this is a very, very small community because I recognize many faces in the room. So I'm choosing that it's a small community rather than being old. So I'm here today to take you on a quick whirlwind tour through the agri industry, what we've been doing on the Endangered Species Act. My presentation has 5 sections. We're going to talk a little bit about Agri-RITS 101, some of the statistics surrounding Agri-RITS in the ESA. We're going to talk about current initiatives and some challenges and not last and not least, some opportunities. So I brought a few slides to show you how everything starts in our industry. And this is what takes our material and puts it in your foundation of your house, your local school, or your local playground. So we start off, once we've stripped the topsoil and overburden off a site, material, the sand, gravel, or stone to remove from the face. The photo on your left is a photo of a sand and gravel operation, so the material's unconsolidated, scooped up with a bucket, moved to the plant for processing. Photo on the right is a quarry face. The material that you see in front of the front-end loader was blasted from the face using explosives. Once the material leaves the face by the truck, it gets processed, usually first by crushing. Then it's screened to separate the particle sizes to make different products, and then it's shipped by truck from stockpiles on the site to the project in which it's going to be consumed. So that's the construction, the production side of our business. The really interesting thing is we get to contribute to 2 new communities. One is the communities that we build with our products, and the other community is what we build when we're finished with our sites. So just to quickly take you through some of the places that our products go. This is the parkway we love to hate. Who drove here on the DVP today? I did not, but I'm sure some of you did. Resurf it every couple of years and a main artery into the city. Any of you are Toronto FC fans? You will recognize this particular site. This is BMO Field being constructed. Interestingly enough, this is the base for one of the fields, and made with recycled Agri-RITS as well as primary Agri-RITS from sites not currently been extracted before. And this is 350 Fronts West. This is one of the many condominium buildings that are going up in the city of Toronto right now. So on to the more interesting landscapes. Once the Agri-RITS are removed from the sites, they're rehabilitated in accordance with site plans required by provincial legislation. Rehabilitation has varied greatly through the years. In the 70s, rehabilitation to agriculture was cool. Everybody wanted us to put it back into agriculture, so we got pretty good at that. In the 80s, everything shifted to more recreational purposes, so we built ball diamonds, soccer fields, tennis courts, golf courses. And in the 90s, the focus became more directed to natural heritage. We learned to create wetlands, forests of exclusively native species, and grasslands that would become tall grass prairie rather than just hayfields. So in the past decade, we've become even more eclectic, to the point where we can create a pretty broad variety of landscapes, focusing more on how they interconnect on the landscape than ever before. So I brought a few examples. This is a photo of Walker Brothers Vinelands Quarry. This is a working orchard within the quarry. This project went from applied research to wine in 10 years. Those of you that are involved in research know it's a pretty short time frame. I don't know what the wine tasted like for the first batch, but Peter says good. So 10 years start to finish is a pretty good track record. This is Kern Park. This is Kern Park in Burlington, an urban nature park originally owned by King Paving in the Niagara Escarpment, tucked up against a created escarpment face, very actively used by the residential community that now surrounds it. This is quite a spot. This is in the bottom right-hand corner. This is Dufferin's Milton Quarry. If any of you hiked the Bruce Trail through Milton, you may have come to this site now. This is a really outstanding example of rehabilitation. Again, very quickly done. Within 15 years of starting this extraction, they have over 20 pairs, different breeds of breeding birds on the site. It's also still a working quarry, and I'm guessing that most of those birds that are nesting there don't know that. It's another interesting site just outside the Greenbelt, just north of Highway 9. This was extracted and rehabilitated by Lafarge. Interesting site, 285 acres with a 20-hectare lake. The lake is surrounded by grassland. It makes it a little bit unique because it's a perfect habitat for bobolink and meadowlark now. So those are just some quick examples of some of the things that our members are involved with. So by the numbers, lots of aggregate operations in Ontario. 3,705 licenses on private land and 2,066 permits on Crown land. Of these, approximately 120 are issued to municipalities, conservation authorities, and other government ministries. The remainder are licensed to corporation and individual citizens. There's an additional 900 permits owned by the Ministry of Transportation that are not included in this number. So these licenses and permits cover about 183,000 hectares in total. Small numbers compared to even the numbers that Ducks Unlimited has been rehabilitating. But it is our total contribution to change that we could affect in the future. In 2011, Ontario consumed 159 million tons, which equates to a yearly per capita consumption of 12 tons per person. So all of you and me consume 12 tons per person each year for as long as you've been here in Ontario. So even though you don't shovel it, you consume it by the roads you drive on and the schools and the offices that you work in. So our industry has had an interesting opportunity in the implementation of the ESA. From the Act from 2008 onwards, we had an opportunity to understand early how the new ESA would affect our business. Between June 2008 and June 2010, sites that were licensed prior to June 2008 worked collaboratively with M&R to finalize aggregate agreements on their sites. These agreements exempted existing aggregate operations from being in contravention of parts of the ESA with respect to the species and sites named in each agreement. 93 of these were signed, and they're now in place across 27 counties and regions and protecting 20 species. So our industry viewed these as the implementation to a large extent of business as usual, since the agreements reflected the current species on the site and in many cases the current appropriate practices to protect the species year-round. Imagine you're a turtle and you're living just north of the French River and you're coming out to lay your eggs, and you crawl out of the lake on the granite outcrop, and lo and behold, in front of you is a nice, smooth, round, soft pile of sand. Not natural, but created by our industry. So it stands to reason that we have a lot of endangered species in many of our sites. So those turtles aren't stupid. They're pretty smart. They come in and lay their eggs every year, but our members have been actively engaging with and protecting those species for many years. So this is very much a continuation of business as usual. So the good thing that this did is the agreements pushed us into engagement with M&R and other agencies as we moved through the steps to document and finalize the agreements. This was a learning process, but also did a lot to build trust and understanding between government and our industry. It was also a good early opportunity to understand the ESA and its implementation. 6 overall benefit permits have also been issued under the ESA for aggregate sites, mostly in southern and central Ontario, since 2008. 8 species are included in these permits. So while there have been only a few permits issued, the agreements signed beforehand represent a large number of sites and species. So on to initiatives. The industry's been exploring a number of initiatives over the past several years with regard to the ESA and its implementation. As with other industries affected by the ESA, we work collaboratively with M&R, developing a document to outline all the working parts of the ESA and how operators are required to work within their parameters of their agreements and permits. We figured out that many of the activities that we do on aggregate sites on a daily basis are actually appropriate practices for managing species at risk. We had an opportunity to bring the snake project, I'm going to say simply snakes, exciting snakes, to our operations health and safety conference. So there's all of our plant managers and the people that work in our sites. And I can tell you I was really, really surprised at how many of them could pick these species out. None of them wanted to hold the rat snake. I had to hold the rat snake all day, but they all knew what it was and where it lived and what it looked like. So there's a fair bit of knowledge out there. Our industry is exploring other initiatives involving research and habitat creation as well. Members of the industry are participating in or funding a number of research projects in conjunction with existing agreements and permits. So many of the 20 species that are currently covered by the agreements are also in active research. Specifically, industry members are also doing research on bobolink and several turtle species, focusing on field research and monitoring. In the case of turtles, several large monitoring projects are underway. Industry members are also working on several field-level projects involving transplanting techniques for species at risk. We're also working with Bird Studies Canada on research involving bank swallow habitat. Even though bank swallow is not listed, it is covered under the Migratory Birds Convention Act. And we now know that Ontario's gravel pits provide a significant amount of habitat for bank swallow. Ongoing research is helping us develop a comprehensive best management practice guide to guide producers to develop their operations in a way that maximizes the habitat available without compromising their daily extraction activities. It's a good start, and those kinds of activities we now hope we can transfer to species at risk for doing the same BMPs in the future. Work is also ongoing with industry to understand how to create more diversified and productive habitat with regard to species at risk. As I mentioned earlier, we already create significant amounts of habitat, but many of our members are now focusing on how to complete progressive rehab that will accommodate the species resident in their sites more appropriately. OSSGA is working with several groups to try and implement better bioregional landscape reclamation as well, and this project may in time provide good documentation on the creation of linkages that can benefit multiple species across broader landscapes. We're also part of MNR's Bobolink Roundtable, a topic that will be covered by other speakers at this conference today and tomorrow. As part of our work in that forum, we're also working on ideas to properly implement the concepts of net benefit and the creation of safe harbor agreements specific to Ontario species at risk. As much as we've had opportunities to work in a very collaborative manner early in the development of the ESA with MNR and other partners, we still see significant challenges in both the implementation and future development of the ESA. New species listings are a challenge for any industry that already undergoes a lengthy and challenging permitting process. Licensing and permitting an agri-site in Ontario can be as quick as 18 months, but often turns into a long multi-year process. The rate at which new species are listed speaks to a constant need to revise reports and studies, as well as to continue with endless field work. A balance needs to be achieved between the protection of the species and the business uncertainty and risk associated with protecting them. Our industry in particular is already governed by 25 pieces of legislation at the local, region, provincial, and federal level. Adding another piece of legislation is an additional regulatory burden that has been approved. However, creating a completely separate process to implement it seems to be the most complicated process, especially with 215 species involved. Our industry supports a streamlined approach to achieve a common goal, and using existing statutes to achieve the proper oversight and monitoring framework makes sense to us. We support MNR's recent efforts to find a more streamlined and straightforward process to implement the ESA. The recent listing of 2 bat species that are in decline due to disease have raised a new issue for our industry. Many of the species that are listed have challenges that are generally habitat-based. How do industries working in areas where there's sufficient and ample habitat, as in both these bat species that have just been listed, how do we rationalize protecting that habitat for a species that is in decline for other reasons? This does not make sense at either the field level or the true long-term management of the species level. I'm not here today with an answer, but this is a relatively new question for us, and I guess this is a question to address as we move forward. We also continue to struggle with inconsistency in interpretation at the district level with MNR SAR staff. Many members of our industry work in multiple districts, and unfortunately, decisions regarding SAR monitoring, field inventory techniques, and mitigation measures vary greatly from district to district. This makes it extremely difficult to plan for monitoring and mitigation over multiple sites when there's uncertainty between districts in the implementation of the same legislation. This creates a system where companies must approach the same species in different ways in different districts, instead of building on mutually agreeable solutions that can be improved and refined over time. And as much as there are some challenges with what's going on now with implementing a new Endangered Species Act with new requirements, we also believe that there are many opportunities to build on regulatory framework to build more capacity to support species at risk. So we're confident that we can, as an industry, create the best of the best. By that I mean, with full cooperation from industry, government, academia, and the NGOs, we can continue to learn quickly and efficiently how to build and maintain the best habitats possible for species at risk. I've been very encouraged by the excellent research done by OMAFRA and MNR and stewardship groups at the Bobolink Roundtable. We feel confident now that our industry has good science to support us as we continue to refine our abilities to build perfect bobolink habitat. Progressive and final rehabilitation is a regulatory requirement for our industry across the province, and including the habitat of species at risk in our work is a logical fit, and one that is in progress as we speak. This is not an activity that has to wait to get started. It's working on the ground right across the province right now. But as we continue to understand the new legislation, we're understandably concerned that we may be creating a catch-22. Building habitat so that the species will come may lead to restrictions on future use of land that may be held in reserve for future extraction. The concept of safe harbor principles provides a path by which we can make more lands available for creating the solutions while giving industry solid experience in habitat creation. If only a tenth of the currently licensed land is converted into habitat for species at risk, this would put 18,000 hectares into habitat creation. Given that licenses often have a lifespan of 20 years or more, this could provide significant interim habitat, especially if it's created collaboratively to be the best of the best. Safe harbor is an important part of the future of species at risk for our industry. And last but not least, we see huge opportunities in the sharing of research between the private sector, government, NGOs, and academia. The creation of better solutions to species at risk challenges will come more quickly and be more successful if science is shared widely in the community. This will also help us find the challenges faster and ultimately find the solutions in a similar fast manner. Our industry does a lot of site-specific research on natural heritage, sometimes for many, many years before license processes are started. This information is public as the license moves forward, but it does seem sometimes that the only time these four groups share a look at science they're completing is when they're preparing for an Ontario Municipal Board hearing. A change in that mindset to share data directly and early to achieve better results will be a big step in the right direction, a direct benefit to the species at risk, and a worthwhile result from the research. So those are my comments today. I'll turn it over to Megan.